The wind moaned across the sleeping town as Alara Vance stepped from the train, her breath clouding in the lamplight. The night was colorless, a smear of gray and ghost blue, and yet something in it pulsed. Alive. The road that led to the cemetery seemed to draw her forward, each footstep swallowed by mist. Then she heard it. A voice, faint but deliberate, calling her name with the softness of a secret once shared. Alara. Her pulse faltered. It wasn't possible. The sound came again, threaded through the wind, carrying warmth where there should have been none. She stood motionless, trembling between disbelief and longing, the chill biting through her coat. For years she had buried that voice with her memories, but tonight it had come back to find her. The gate groaned as Alara pushed it, the sound slicing through the silence like something alive. The hinges, swollen with rust and memory, protested her intrusion. Beyond, the cemetery waited. Rows of crooked stones and sinking earth, each mound softened by decades of neglect. The scent of damp soil filled her lungs as she stepped inside, and the fog seemed to draw tighter, closing the world behind her. Somewhere in the darkness, the whisper returned, closer this time. Low and aching, her name pulled through invisible teeth. Alara! She froze. Every instinct told her to run, but something stronger, a terrible longing, rooted her to the ground. She whispered back, "Barely a breath. Jonas?" The answer was silence. Then a slow creak, as if another gate deeper within had opened on its own. "Miss Vance." The voice came from the fog behind her, gravel thick and weary. Alara turned to find Reverend Hale standing beneath the withered branches, his lantern painting his face in trembling gold. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Not tonight." She studied him, uncertain if the fear in his voice belonged to concern or guilt. "I heard something," she said softly. "Someone called my name." Hale's eyes flickered toward the graves, his lips tightening. The dead have their own ways of speaking, but they don't call to the living without reason. The lantern light fluttered. In its dim glow, the old man looked older still, like a relic of the place itself, carved from shadow and regret. "Nis for use nadam may, ashavings is severs." Alara's steps carried her deeper into the graveyard, the ground soft and uneven beneath her boots. Names passed under her gaze like fragments of forgotten prayers until one stopped her cold. The tombstone was tall, marble-veined with black, and on it 2 names, Jonas Marrow, and beneath, smaller, as though etched in afterthought, Alara Vance. The chisel marks were fresh, the grooves still raw. Her heart seized in her chest. She knelt, brushing her fingers over the letters, the stone damp and cold. "Who did this?" she whispered. Behind her, a crow screamed from the trees, its cry echoing through the fog like a warning. Hale's lantern flickered once more in the distance, and she realized he was no longer watching her. The ground shuddered faintly beneath her knees, a tremor so subtle it could have been her imagination, until the earth exhaled. A slow hiss, warm and hollow, rose from the tomb beside Jonas' grave. The air thickened with the smell of soil and old flowers. Alara backed away, staring as the stone lid shifted. A fraction, then more. A sound escaped from within. Not quite a voice, not yet human, but pleading all the same. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Jonas," she breathed again, voice trembling. The fog swirled violently, drawn toward the open tomb like water into a drain. And then, faint but undeniable, came the sound of a heartbeat. The morning after the cemetery, Alara stood before the old Vance Manor, its windows blind with dust, its once white walls turned to gray. The voice had not come again, yet silence clung to her, like a second skin. Inside, everything smelled of decay and lavender. Her mother's favorite scent, long since faded into the walls. She moved through the rooms as though trespassing in her own past. On the mantel above the cold hearth sat a photograph of Jonas Merrow, smiling, alive, eyes bright with the kind of trust that time destroys. She remembered the day it was taken, the lake behind them, sunlight trembling across the water, his promise that he would never leave her. Her fingers brushed the glass, and for an instant, the reflection in it smiled back. Alara found the letters in the top drawer of her mother's old writing desk, bound with a fraying red ribbon. The ink had browned with age, the paper soft as skin. Each letter began the same. My dearest Alara, and ended with the same signature. Jonas. Her throat tightened as she read his words, alive with longing, laced with fear. He had known something was coming. Every line carried the scent of desperation and farewell. They watch me, one letter said. They say I've done something unforgivable, but I swear it's not true. The last page trembled in her hand. His handwriting faltered there, unfinished, the final word cut short by a stain that looked too dark to be ink. Memory drifted in, soft as fog. The lake, the evening light, Jonas' voice low and earnest as he held her hand. If anything ever happens, he'd said, listen for me, I'll find my way back. The water mirrored their faces, rippling with the promise. Alara remembered laughing, calling him a poet, brushing mud from his sleeve. But now that laughter returned hollow. In the reflection of her mind, she saw not the lake, but the grave. His lips pale, his hand motionless. The same promise, twisted by death. A whisper touched her again, faint but certain. I kept my word. She jolted upright, her heart pounding as though she were still there, on the shore, watching him step into the dark water. When Alara ventured into town, conversation ceased wherever she passed. Faces turned, eyes hollow with recognition. She caught fragments, her name whispered, her return questioned. At the grocer's, an old woman dropped her basket at the sight of her. We thought you'd gone for good, the woman muttered, crossing herself. Some things should stay buried. Alara said nothing. Even the air of this place seemed to judge her. The church bells tolled once, and in their fading echo she felt Jonas's presence again. Closer, insistent. She turned toward the sound, but the street was empty, and every window curtain had drawn itself shut. Night fell heavy and soundless. Alara sat before the mirror in her childhood room, its surface warped and cracked at the corners. She lit a candle, watching the flame shiver. For a long moment nothing moved. Then the reflection's lips parted, though hers did not. You shouldn't have come back, it whispered. Her breath caught. The candle guttered violently, spilling wax across the table. Behind her, the door creaked open though no wind stirred. In the mirror, another figure appeared over her shoulder. A man's outline, blurred by shadow, but unmistakably familiar. His hand rose, slow and beckoning. The reflection smiled, and this time, so did she, without meaning to. The storm came without warning. By dusk, the sky had folded itself into iron, rain slashing sideways through the cemetery gates. Alara's umbrella turned useless in the wind as she trudged through the mud, lantern in hand, driven by the same whisper that had haunted her dreams. The graves glistened under the downpour, water pooling between them like dark glass. She reached Jonas' tomb and stopped cold. The lid had shifted further. Fresh soil clung to the edges, the ground sunken around it, as though something beneath had stirred. Lightning split the sky, and in that brief light she saw it. The faint outline of a handprint pressed into the stone from within. She fell to her knees, pulse hammering, half in terror, half in impossible hope. Help me! The words rose from the crack in the tomb, muffled, broken, yet unmistakably real. Alara staggered back, the lantern nearly slipping from her grasp. Her mind screamed that it couldn't be, but her heart knew the voice. Jonas. She pressed her hand to the stone. Jonas, it's me, she whispered. The silence after her words was unbearable. Then softly, cold, so cold, she cried out, clawing at the wet earth, fingernails breaking against the marble. Hold on! I'll find someone. It'll get you out. But the wind swallowed her voice. The world seemed to hold its breath, and through the storm came one final whisper. You already left me once. She didn't hear him approach through the rain. Ilara, came Reverend Hale's voice, rough with urgency. He stepped into the light, drenched and trembling, the lantern swinging wildly in his hand. You have to stop. She turned on him, furious. He is alive, she shouted. He's calling me. Hale's expression hardened with something that looked like guilt. You don't understand. He shouldn't be. Lightning illuminated his face, and for a moment she saw terror, not of her, but of the thing beneath the stone. You think I buried him? He hissed. We did what we had to. His words were nearly lost to the storm, but the look in his eyes said more than his voice ever could. When Hale reached for her, she shoved him aside. If you won't help me, I'll do it myself, she cried, wrenching at the stone lid. The lantern fell, its flame guttering in the mud, leaving only flashes of lightning to guide her hands. Hale shouted her name, but she didn't stop. With a sound like splitting bone, the lid shifted, then toppled, striking the ground with a hollow thud. Ilara stumbled back, rain plastering her hair to her skin. From within the tomb rose a breath of warm air, thick and earthy, smelling of rot and roses. Hale's voice broke. God, forgive us, he whispered. Something within the darkness moved. The moment stretched, silent, but for the rain. Then a hand, pale, dirt-caked, unmistakably human, rose from the darkness and gripped the edge of the tomb. Ilara's breath caught, her body frozen between flight and faith. Jonas, she whispered, tears mingling with rain. The hand tightened, trembling with effort, and a low groan escaped the grave. Reverend Hale stumbled backward, dropping his lantern. No, he rasped. It's not him anymore. But Ilara stepped forward, reaching out, her own hand trembling inches away. You found me, she said softly. The hand stilled, and then, slowly, reached back. The earth opened like a wound. Ilara knelt beside the broken tomb, staring into the hollow beneath where stone gave way to darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of roots and something older, metallic. Like dried blood, Reverend Hale begged her to stop, but she barely heard him. The whisper called again, clear and close, tender as breath against her ear. Come down. Lantern in hand, she lowered herself into the pit, boots sinking into soft soil. The walls pulsed faintly with moisture, streaked with roots like veins. Jonas, she whispered, voice trembling. If you're here, show me. Then from the blackness below came a faint glow, green, shifting, alive. The chamber stretched deeper than she imagined, carved into the earth like an ancient cellar. The walls twisted with gnarled roots, some as thick as her arm, pulsing faintly with light that throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat. At the center lay remnants of wood, coffin boards split apart from within. Ilara's lantern flickered, throwing trembling halos across the soil. Something moved in the corner, slow and deliberate. A hand, then a shoulder, then the faint outline of a man. Jonas, or the memory of him. His eyes caught the light first, glowing faintly gold, his skin marked by the roots as though the earth had tried to claim him. You came, he murmured, voice hoarse and reverent. Ilara fell to her knees before him, reaching out with a trembling hand. Jonas. His name escaped her like prayer. He smiled faintly, a slow, broken smile that didn't reach his eyes. His skin was cold beneath her touch, cold and damp like the stones around them. They buried me alive, he whispered. and the words cracked like bone. "I called for you." She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." He leaned closer, and for an instant she saw the man he had been. The warmth, the trust. "You came back," he said. "You kept your promise." But beneath his calm, something stirred, something restless, and she felt the earth begin to hum. A voice broke through the silence above. "Step away from him, Ilara." Reverend Hale's shout echoed down the chamber walls. He descended the ladder, lantern held high, his expression drawn tight with guilt and fear. "You don't know what you've done," he rasped. He was not meant to rise. Jonas turned his golden eyes upward, a quiet fury in his stillness. "You buried me because you feared what you couldn't understand." Hale's breath came shallow. "You were cursed, boy. You brought death to this town." Ilara's voice cut through them both. "Enough!" Her gaze burned through the tears. He was human. But as the light trembled, so did Jonas. And for the first time, she wondered if the Reverend might be right. The air grew thick, vibrating with a low hum that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The roots along the walls writhed like serpents, curling toward Jonas. He gasped, clutching his chest as the earth around him cracked open, releasing a soft light like trapped souls escaping. "It's not me," he choked. "It's what they left inside me." Ilara reached for him, but Hale pulled her back. "He's bound to it," the Reverend shouted. Jonas' body arched, light spilling from his mouth, his voice breaking into a scream that was both his and not. The roots shuddered, whispering her name in 100 voices. "Ilara." Then silence, sudden, perfect, and final. The silence after the scream was unbearable. Ilara's ears rang, her heartbeat loud against the emptiness. The roots had gone still, their glow fading to dull veins in the earth. Jonas knelt motionless, his head bowed, breath shallow. Reverend Hale crossed himself, whispering words too quiet to hear. Ilara crawled toward Jonas, reaching to lift his chin. His skin felt cold, yet beneath it, she sensed a pulse. Not his own, but something older, something borrowed. "You were right," he murmured weakly. "I wasn't meant to wake." Tears stung her eyes. "Then why did you call me back?" His gaze found hers, gold flickering faintly. "Because you left before I could tell you." "The truth." Jonas' breath came ragged, each word trembling as if pulled from deep water. "They said I cursed them, that I brought the fever." His eyes fluttered open, reflecting the dim lantern flame, but it wasn't me. It was the well. The water itself. The earth under this place is wrong. Ilara listened, numb, as Hale turned away, face ashen. "You knew," she said. The Reverend's silence was answer enough. Jonas' voice broke into a whisper. "He prayed for mercy, but when the children died, they blamed me." His gaze turned hollow. "They buried me alive to stop it, but it wasn't me they sealed away. It was the thing beneath." The lantern flickered once, as though the earth itself shivered in remembrance. "I begged them not to do it," Hale whispered, his voice breaking under the strain. "But the town was lost to fear. They said he carried the sickness, that his words turned prayers to ash." His eyes glistened with the memory. "When I sealed the coffin, I heard him calling through the boards." He covered his face with shaking hands. "I told myself it wasn't real, that it was the wind." Ilara rose slowly, fury and sorrow mingling in her voice. "You let him die knowing he was innocent." Hale met her gaze with hollow resignation. "I saved the town," he said, though the words sounded empty. Jonas, half-conscious, whispered, "No, Reverend, you damned it." The ground trembled again, subtle at first, then deep and resonant. The sound was not thunder. It came from below. Ilara turned toward the far wall, where the soil pulsed faintly with light. Jonas' eyes widened. "That's where it started," he said. "The well they built on my land. It reaches the thing that sleeps." Reverend Hale staggered backward. "You brought it back with your voice," he whispered to Alara. "Your grief called to it?" The wall cracked open with a slow groan, revealing a hollow vein of shimmering darkness that breathed like a lung. From it came a whisper, layered and ancient. "Alara." She stumbled back, clutching Jonas' hand as cold wind poured from the opening. The voice filled the chamber. Not one voice, but many, merging in a sorrowful chorus. "We are the forgotten," it said, echoing through Ilara's bones. Faces began to form in the mist. Men, women, children, all translucent, all buried once by fear. Jonas stepped forward, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked cheeks. "They're the ones," he whispered. "The fever took them, not me. The earth claimed them all." Ilara's lantern dimmed as the phantoms drew near, their eyes hollow but kind. One reached for Hale, brushing his sleeve. "Forgive us," he murmured, collapsing to his knees. The light around them grew brighter, pulsing with warmth and grief. Jonas turned to Alara, his voice breaking. "Now, you know why I called you back." The light from the phantoms dimmed until only the faintest glow clung to the roots. The chamber was hushed, heavy with the weight of what had been revealed. Jonas stood trembling, his body no longer entirely his own. Light pulsed beneath his skin like veins of fire. "It's taking me back," he whispered. Alara clutched his arm. "No," she said, voice cracking. "You can fight it." He smiled sadly, brushing mud from her cheek with a trembling hand. "It's not something to fight, Alara. I was meant to sleep with them." The roots stirred again, the whisper rising from the fissure below. "One must return." Reverend Hale stepped forward, his face streaked with guilt. "If he stays, the dead won't rest." Alara's gaze wavered between them both. "Then let me go instead." The whispering chorus grew louder, the air thick with unseen presences. "A soul for a soul," they murmured, the words rippling through the air like wind over water. Hale fell to his knees, weeping. "It must be done," he muttered. Alara turned to Jonas, her voice steady now. "You gave your life for their fear. Let me give mine for your peace." He shook his head violently. "No, you don't belong here. You still breathe." "So did you," she said. The chamber trembled again. The fissure pulsed with light that drew their shadows long against the wall. Jonas caught her face in his hands, kissed her forehead softly. "I called you here to say goodbye." The light swallowed his outline, golden and fragile as dawn breaking through fog. The ground convulsed, splitting the chamber floor with a thunderous crack. Hale shouted for them to run, but the fissure had already widened, releasing a blinding torrent of light. Jonas turned to Alara, shouting over the roar, "Go!" But she clung to him, refusing. The light poured around them, swallowing soil and stone alike. Faces appeared within it, ghostly, serene, rising skyward. Alara felt herself weightless, suspended between life and something vast beyond it. Jonas' voice came again, fading through the radiance. "Remember me where the wind touches the graves." And then, in one great breath, the light drew him back into the earth, sealing the chamber in silence once more. When Alara opened her eyes, she was lying on the damp grass above the grave. The storm had passed. The moon hung low, reflected in pools of rainwater across the cemetery. Reverend Hale knelt nearby, his lantern relit, its light steady but faint. "He's gone," he whispered. Alara rose slowly, her body aching as though she had carried the weight of centuries. The tomb beside her was sealed once more, smooth, unbroken, as if it had never opened. Only the soil bore the mark of what had happened, and the whisper that had haunted her for years was finally gone. But the wind carried something else now, a calm she'd never No. The first light of morning crept across the stones, soft and silver. Birds stirred among the trees, their song hesitant, fragile. Elira stood at the gate of the cemetery, her hand resting on the cold iron. The town below still slept, unaware that its curse had been lifted. Hale remained behind, praying softly over the grave, his silhouette small against the growing light. Elira turned once more to the resting place of Jonas Merrow. "You kept your word," she whispered. As the sun rose, it caught the dew upon the tomb like tears of glass, and in that fleeting shimmer, she thought she saw his reflection, smiling, finally free. Days passed in a quiet haze. Elira remained in the manor on Wraith Hill, her thoughts echoing through its empty corridors. The air no longer carried whispers, yet she often caught herself listening for one. In the evenings, she walked to the window overlooking the cemetery, watching fog gather like a memory refusing to fade. The town below seemed lighter somehow, as though released from an invisible weight. But inside her chest lingered the hollow ache of unfinished words. She could still feel the last warmth of Jonas's touch, the echo of it humming faintly beneath her skin. Each night she lit a single candle by the window, not for summoning but remembrance. Some loves, she realized, don't die. They simply learn to rest. Reverend Hale aged years in days. He spent his hours among the graves, mending broken stones, cleaning forgotten markers, whispering apologies to names long erased by time. Each night, he returned to Jonas' tomb, his lantern trembling in his hand. "Forgive me," he would murmur, over and over. The villagers had noticed the change. They no longer avoided him, but no one dared ask what had broken him so. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, he imagined he heard Jonas' voice, not accusing, but forgiving. It was enough to keep him breathing, though his shoulders bent further with every passing day, burdened not by sin, but by remembrance. On the seventh night, the wind shifted. Elira woke from a shallow dream, her heart racing. At first, she thought it was the storm, the windows rattling, the shutters breathing. Then she heard it. Her name, faint and familiar, carried gently through the open window. Not a cry for help, but a calling of love, soft as a sigh. She rose, barefoot, candle in hand, and crossed to the sill. Outside, the cemetery shimmered with moonlight, silver mist drifting between the stones. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "You always keep your promises," she whispered. The wind replied in kind, gentle, warm, almost human. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She dreamt of the garden behind the house, though it had long been overgrown. In her dream, the roses had bloomed again, blood-red and gleaming with dew. Jonas stood among them, his face, as she remembered, alive and undone burden. "It's beautiful here," he said. Elira nodded, the sunlight soft around them. "You waited," she murmured. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining without weight or shadow. "Always," he said, and when she blinked he was gone, leaving only the sound of the wind through roses. When she woke, dawn was painting the walls gold, and the air smelled faintly of earth and blooms that should not have existed. Morning broke with the hush of a prayer. The fog lifted from the cemetery, revealing rows of stones, shining in soft gold light. Reverend Hale found the gate ajar and followed the path up to Wraith Hill, where Elira's candle still burned in her window. Inside, he discovered her seated at the desk, head bowed over a single letter, her face peaceful, her lips curved in the faintest smile. The candle had burned itself down to wax and smoke. He read the letter once, folded it gently, and looked out toward the graveyard below. The wind carried her name one final time, soft, content, and gone. Hale whispered a prayer, though he knew she had already found what she was searching for. More disaster starting easy.